Welcome back to Midweek Politics. I'm David Pakman. Michael McCann joining us soon. Just a quick note, we know, of course, of what is going on in Haiti, and with this incredible earthquake that they've had, the devastation in what is already the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere seems to be huge. And obviously you can turn on any 24-hour news network at this point and find out about what's going on. We certainly don't have anything to add at this point. Any opportunities to help the people there and to anything that we can do, we will, of course, mention in next week's program and on our website. But we're aware of what's going on. I know that we will get emails talking about why we did not mention that. And we just, at this point, don't have anything to add. The analysis is very clear, which is that the situation there is horrible. And for what's already the poorest country in the West, it just is not, it was absolutely horrible to hear this. I was at the gym on a treadmill when this came over CNN, and it was a bizarre thing to hear in the middle of everything else that's going on, and certainly not good. So let's talk about Game Change, which is this new book by John Heilemann and Mark Halperin. There's a lot in this book. This is a book that has been compiled over, I don't even know how long, I guess a couple of years, and it follows a number of different elections and a number of different candidates, and the information in it is incredible. To start with, there is information about Bill Clinton's handling of Ted Kennedy as it relates to Hillary's candidacy, and we'll just go through a bunch of the stuff in this book. Hillary was working on Caroline Kennedy, and Bill Clinton was handling Ted Kennedy. The day after the Iowa caucuses, Bill Clinton called Ted Kennedy, and he was hoping for an endorsement for Hillary, making the case, of course, for his wife. Bill then went on belittling Obama in a manner that deeply offended Kennedy. Recounting the conversation later to a friend, Teddy was upset that Clinton had said, "A few years ago, this guy would have been getting us coffee." So Ted Kennedy clearly not happy with that, liked Barack Obama, was planning on supporting Obama, or at least was leaning towards it at the time. Unbelievable. Also from the Hillary Clinton side, Hillary Clinton was pushing, it sounds pretty heavily, Lewis, for mentioning the cocaine, the possible cocaine connections of Barack Obama. Clinton senior strategist Mark Penn boasted to his staff how many times he managed to say the word cocaine on his famous hardball segment, and Hillary Clinton was actually pleased with this, actually saying, "Good for him, let's push it out." Obviously, the aides disagreed, saying it's a PR disaster to start going on TV and mentioning cocaine. And I agree with her. That would have been a disaster to continue pushing that. Also reports that Hillary Clinton was planning a presidential transition before she had even won the primary. Another interesting note, Al Gore actually received a visit from the Obamas in Nashville before he announced he'd be running for president. He wanted to get Al Gore's assurance that he wouldn't be running before he decided that he would run. A lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, Lewis, that's just fascinating to hear about, is it not?
Yeah, it's always interesting. And, we've heard some interesting stories from guests on our show about, Hillary Clinton and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we have. And you never know with this. Obviously, the critics will say that a lot of this stuff isn't true. The Palin stuff that we're going to get to directly conflicts with what was in her book. Now, the problem is the Palin book already had a lot of criticism for having stuff in there that was just completely made up or made for her to look better. And now there is actually something out that directly contradicts the Sarah Palin comment. And let's just start right away with Palin was visited by the McCain people. She was asked, "Can you handle this in 2 days? If we nominate you as the vice president, you'll be one of the most famous people on the planet, literally 48 hours from now. Can you handle this?" And she said, "You know what? I'm not nervous at all. It's God's plan." And she literally just did not seem to be nervous at all, completely dissociating from the possibility that she actually might not be able to handle what she's being presented with. Again, we are hearing she didn't know basic national security stuff. Here is a couple of examples of the things that, again, she denied not knowing. She said this stuff was made up. Again, we're hearing specific things that Sarah Palin doesn't know. Take a listen.
Her foreign policy tutors are literally taking her through. This is World War I. This is World War II. This is the Korean War. This is how the Cold War worked. This is the new war on terror. They're trying to teach her everything because Steve Schmidt had gone to them and said she knows nothing. A week later, after the convention was over, she still didn't really understand why there was a North Korea and a South Korea. She was still regularly saying that Saddam Hussein had been behind 9/11. And literally the next day, her son was about to ship off to Iraq. And when they asked her who her son was going to fight, she couldn't explain that.
How many people do we need to hear this kind of thing from until we can get a consensus, even among the most extreme Sarah Palin lovers, that she was incompetent? It was an ill-advised selection made at the last minute because the preferred pick of Joe Lieberman was going to be too liberal and not well accepted by the Republican convention. That is apparently what even McCain aides said. This is from 60 Minutes, and I watched it, and it was incredible. Happened. They wanted Joe Lieberman. Within 48 hours of that convention, it was announced it leaked that Joe Lieberman was going to have trouble. And they had to pick Sarah Palin after very, very basic research, and apparently there wasn't very much. They also stated Palin wasn't being very truthful about some things. She was even willing to lie directly. For example, when it was revealed that her husband was a member of that Alaska secession group that wanted to turn Alaska into its own country, Palin suggested, let's just put out a press release saying he wasn't a member, even though he was a member. And the McCain people had to say, you know what, we can't just lie. We can have talking points, we can run around, but we can't just lie when it's so clear that he was. Also, I guess when the Couric interview happened, and everybody remembers the disastrous Katie Couric interview, that is when the McCain people really thought things started to go bad. And here's what they said about that Katie Couric interview.
Until that interview with Katie Couric.
When you consider even national security issues with Russia, as Putin rears his head and comes into the airspace of the United States of America, where do they go? It's Alaska. It's just right over the border.
In her book, Palin accuses CBS News of editing the interview to make her look bad. But Steve Schmidt told us Palin did poorly because she didn't do her homework.
I made the case to her that, in my view, the reason that interview was a failure was because she did not prepare for it. She was focused that morning on answering 10 written questions from a small newspaper in Alaska called the Matsu Valley Frontiersman.
She thought Katie Couric was kind of going for gotcha questions.
I don't think that Katie Couric asked a single unfair question in that interview.
So we're hearing from the McCain people. Nothing unfair was asked in the Katie Couric interview. We know that interview, Lewis, was obviously a huge disaster, and the McCain people really getting worried at that point. Apparently also Palin was difficult to deal with. Things would go bad. She'd become glazed over behind the scenes. She wouldn't even respond when spoken to. She was irritable.